Hi everyone, and welcome back to the 2026 Digital Playbook webinar series. I'm Shane, client partner at Common Ground, and I'm joined by our co-founders Matt and Dan. Today's webinar is part 2 of the series, and it's called Effective SEO in 2026, Beyond Keywords and Rankings. And it's a really important topic at the moment, certainly in terms of planning for 2026. I think SEO is facing some of its biggest changes it's ever seen, maybe even since the kind of inception of Google and SEO. We've got AI-powered search becoming more prominent and the challenge of zero-click results becoming the norm in many cases. A few things I'd like us to cover on the webinar. Essentially, what are the big changes? What do they mean for SEO strategies and performance? And ultimately, what do brands need to start and stop doing in 2026? So let's get straight. I'll jump in with the first question. Matt, I'll come to you. So what do you think, kind of looking at 2026, are going to be the biggest changes we expect to see for SEO?
I mean, unless people have been living under a rock for the past year or so, it's undoubtedly going to be this shift and kind of the introduction of the AI, the LLMs, the AI bots, all of that kind of thing. That's definitely going to be the biggest shift since I started in SEO. It's probably, I can only think of when Google's told everybody they needed a mobile-friendly site. It's the only thing that is even anywhere near comparable, but this is far beyond that. As kind of SEOs, as marketers, I think we've been incredibly lucky only to have to concentrate on Google, realistically, for most people, for God knows how long. Now we're going to actually have to look at other platforms, other ways of optimization. Luckily, they're all very similar, probably, but realistically, we're now into a multi-platform discipline as opposed to just the single Google's playground, really. That's by far going to be the biggest shift, and it's how people deal with that. So the other thing that realistically is happening and has been happening kind of progressively for the past probably 10 or 15 years is SEO is becoming less a box of tricks and more akin to traditional marketing. So we're probably losing the last bits of the kind of more youthful marketing aspects, which is kind of the focus on keywords. And now it's very much more focused, as most marketing channels are, most marketing channels and SEO should have been for a while, which is concentrating on the audience and the ICP as opposed to keywords, rankings, traffic, visibility, those kinds of metrics. So that's realistically, I think that's the main changes. Dan, I don't think I've missed anything, but I could well have.
No, I completely agree. I mean, just to expand on it, I just say I think SEO is no longer about rankings, and I think we're seeing that more and more as we come towards the end of this year and we're moving into next year. It's about being recognized. It's about being referenced, trusted across like multiple discovery environments, across like the AI modes, the LLMs, but also within traditional search. I think as things have gone on throughout this year, AI overviews have become a really big thing. A lot of the top of the funnel content is being taken within that. We've got lots of really interesting statistics around that from our own research, where we did analysis of like 90 million keywords, and of those 90 million keywords, 50% of those triggered AI overviews, whereas literally a year before that, only 6.5 million of those keywords triggered an AI overview. So, I mean, that's a 500% increase just within that 12 months. And I'm expecting that to continue to progress and to grow. And a lot of those AI overviews, just for clarity's sake, is predominantly around top of the funnel content. So a lot of the informational, educational content that we create and is still really valuable is going into those AI overviews. And it's essentially meaning that we're getting less clicks. There's lots of information around that, so I won't go into too much around that in terms of the decoupling and all that sort of information. But that top of the funnel is, whilst still important, and we'll get onto this, I'm sure, talking about creation of content around that to maintain within the LLMs and those AI overviews. I think predominantly going forward, we need to focus around that commercial content, the commercial elements around that, so that the high intent terms we're ranking for, we're visible for, and we can drive commercial. I think that's been coming here at Common Ground, we've talked about commercial elements of SEO for a long time. And now I think that's playing out as we move into 2026.
I think
sorry, Matt, go on.
Shane, one of the main changes is previously you were able to fuel growth, even in conversions, by driving more and more informational traffic. There was obviously this huge breadth of keywords, this huge breadth of search volume and that kind of thing. So even if it didn't convert particularly well, you had this almost infinite source of additional traffic and additional conversions. And what I think we're very quickly getting to is that's not any longer the case. You're almost you're not going to lose all of it, but you can't just continue to churn out additional content for the sake of creating content to drive more traffic. You really have to be more strategic, and as Dan said, kind of focus probably more towards the bottom of the funnel, and even things like CRO, which people I think neglect quite a lot, and kind of because they didn't need to, they could just continually find more traffic to a website. Now that CRO, maximizing the results, maximizing the return on every click you get to a site is significantly more important than it has been up until this point.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I agree with the kind of broad answer that AI is definitely the biggest change for SEO both this year and certainly going into next year. I think the one element of it that will be front of mind for most people watching this who might be kind of planning their kind of digital strategy or their SEO strategy for next year is, what do we do about the AI overviews? Because they're very, very prominent, certainly for top of the funnel. And I think there's a lot of brands and kind of marketers kind of scratching their head in terms of, well, what do we do about it? Do we try to rank within the AI overview, and how do we do that? Is it just traditional SEO? Should we put our efforts and our resource elsewhere? So it'd be good just to get the thoughts from both of you, just in terms of what the approach should be.
Yeah, for me, and I'll take this one, Matt, first, is for me, I think if you're not in there, then your visibility is going to go down further. So it's important as a brand awareness piece to be visible. Okay, so that means that you do need to create some of that top of the funnel content, because of the intent of what I see in terms of the keywords is predominantly non-transactional, so informational, educational, the hows, the wheres, the whys, etc. That's the type of content that's being brought into the AI overviews, and the statistics that I sort of looked at and showed within the analysis sort of points to that, with 99% of that 45 million keyword being informational. Now, I expect that to change slightly as we progress going forward. So I believe that we need to create top of the funnel content still, but that top of the funnel content can't be how we created it in the past. It has to change. We have to focus it around topics. It has to be intent. It has to be created in a way that is useful for not only users and search engines, but also for LLMs, because that's also going to be picked up by your ChatGPT, your Perplexities, etc. So it's essentially what we're trying to do is just move away from that. Okay, it's all about the search engine, but we're focusing along the lines of its SEO and GEO, and looking at that side. I think the other thing to consider here is those zero-click searches and the keywords there, and how you can track for that. So how many of your keywords are ranking within those AI overviews? Are they building? Is your brand presence expanding whilst they're in the AI overviews? And how can you show that back to the business, essentially? Because if it's growing, you will see impressions growing, obviously, and you hopefully will still see some clicks, but ultimately your brand is being visible. If you're not visible, then you're sort of out of the buying journey.
Anything to add to that, Matt?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I definitely agree with a lot of that. With most of the clients that we work with, I always explain kind of the AI overviews is there. It's great that you're in them, but don't expect to get a lot of clicks from them, essentially. So if you're not within them, you're not being seen at all. There's no brand recognition. There is literally 0% chance that you're going to get a click from it. So it's a lot better to be in them, and realistically, they're only going to become more prominent, and it's only a matter of time before AI mode is the default mode within Google as well. So you still need to do a lot of the things that you were doing previously from an SEO point of view to appear in them and make sure that you have prominence once that switch becomes a more permanent thing, ultimately, because Google are essentially, when Google set their mind to something, that's exactly what's going to happen. And they have made it clear that AI mode is going to be the thing that they're going to go for going forward. And again, it's just the switch needs to become in a mindset behind why you're creating content effectively. So SEO, as it shouldn't have been for a while, shouldn't be seen in a silo, and content created primarily probably for SEO purposes historically should have always served a wider purpose. So it should talk to the audience, it should have conversions, you should be able to use it across your email, your socials, or like all of the other elements of your marketing. And then that's now going to integrate into optimization for the LLMs as well. So the content that you would previously have created purely for a lot of people, there's SEO content, which is a term I hate, but a lot of people were doing that. So realistically, you still need to create that content because people are still doing those searches. How they consume that content is completely different. And to appear within either the AI overviews or the LLMs, you do need to create that top of the funnel content. It needs constantly refreshing, so you're kind of staying relevant, you're proving your authority. But I guess the main switch is you've got to accept that it's a multi-channel content strategy, not just an SEO content strategy anymore. And realistically, as it's always been, it needs to be relevant to the ICP. It needs to be topical as opposed to which keyword has the highest search volume.
Yeah, I completely agree. I guess the kind of takeaway from that, which I think you both touched on, is top of the funnel traffic, top of the funnel content rather, is still important. We should still do it. It still very much serves a purpose. I think it's just the way that we perhaps measure it going forward is going to change. It's not going to be about driving those clicks. It's going to be about the visibility, because you're still helping the user kind of get through that research phase. They're just not doing it on your website, essentially. So you're still getting that brand awareness, and
yeah, and it's going to be, realistically, it's going to be a huge challenge because the senior leaders, the C-suite type level people have been essentially trained by digital marketing people or by marketing teams around the importance of certain metrics like traffic, like visibility and those sorts of things. And understandably, it's going to be a difficult conversation when you're maybe then talking about, actually, no, it's not about necessarily traffic, it's about other things. And I guess it's treating it in a similar way to kind of historically people would treat TV advertising, for example. They'd go, what's our reach, what's our visibility, how many people are seeing this, as opposed to necessarily how many people am I getting to then come through to the website, which has always been a strength of digital marketing, is you can show a more precise figure about how many people are actually consuming and actively clicking on something, whereas it's going to probably become a bit more like the TV advertising or radio advertising. What's the likely reach of this content, as opposed to what's the literal performance of this content.
Yeah, completely agree. Dan, I don't know whether you've got anything to add on that, or whether
Matt's jumped in and was going to go down the line of things. So I agree. I think it's how we frame it going forward in terms of like saying about the traffic that once was is you're not getting, but the importance of the piece of content is still there in terms of other elements of brand awareness and different channels and things like that. So yeah, basically what Matt was saying.
Ultimately, any marketing channel really should be around a revenue figure out the other end. Obviously, there's some models which aren't revenue specific, but for the most websites, ultimately traffic should lead to revenue. So you might not be able to have the same accuracy or the same insight at the top of the funnel or the lead indicators, but the lag indicators around kind of qualified leads, sales ready leads, sales closed revenue, that should still be there. It will be harder to attribute that back to stuff, but ultimately, if those indicators are looking positive, then you're just losing a bit of certainty over what's driving that at the kind of the start of that journey.
And I think just on this actually, around the tracking, I think that's a big thing, because I mean, working in B2B businesses as we do, like the CRM and all of the analytics and stuff like that is being impacted by some of this. Also with like consent modes and cookie policies being implemented, updated, that's also impacting some of this as well. So having that tracking in place is really important to ensure that we can show, not just from an organic perspective, from just a marketing point of view across the board, where things are coming from and how that is contributing to the wider overall business objective, rather than siloed into it's an SEO thing, it's a paid media thing, it's an email marketing thing.
And they're going to be the marketing teams and the brands that do well are the ones that probably have already been building an audience for some time that they own, that's within their data, and they're not relying on kind of things like analytics. They've got their CRM in place, they understand their audience and who's in there. They're going to be the people who win, because they're going to be the people that understand their pipeline, understand their audience, they're tracking people, they're tracking the right things at the right time. They're going to be able to spot the weaknesses within their journey a lot better. I'll be like completely honest, we've worked with some really big clients, and I've always been surprised sometimes how poor their use of their internal data is, their CRM information. They might not be tracking stuff, they can't attribute it, they don't really understand once it goes from marketing into sales, it's kind of lost. So there's going to be a lot more, I guess, within the marketing realm generally, about having to be a lot better and a lot kind of sharper about tracking something from a marketing qualified lead or pre-qualified or wherever you want to start tracking it through to an actual sale, which I think even for large companies, in fact for a large company, is probably even more difficult. But it can be a challenge, but those are the people that are going to be most effective at marketing.
Yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree. So I guess given that big change, and it is a big change, it'd be interesting to hear what you guys think about how the kind of traditional keyword focus SEO approach is going to change going into 2026. Dan, I'll start with you.
I think we sort of touched upon it already, but I think it's gonna alter slightly. It's not going to be a complete and utter focus on it's this keyword, but it's more around the intent of the content that we're trying to create and what we're trying to achieve from each piece of content that we're writing. I think also the creation of that content will be slightly different as well, as we sort of head into a geo world as well, that sort of contributes and complements the organic work that we're doing. So the way that I tend to look at it, and what we've been looking at it for quite some time, is what's our ICP, who are we trying to target, and where are they, what are they looking for, and what are their pain points and the problems that we're trying to solve. And then we're looking at the topics and the briefs around that, and how that may come back into a keyword here and there, but that's not really like the first and foremost element. We need to understand who we're targeting, where they are, and what they're wanting.
Yeah, I think keywords have a kind of secondary use insofar as what's the exact terminology somebody might be using. But for a long time, basing a content strategy on keywords alone has been kind of a bad approach to take ultimately. So it should always start with the audience, the customer, where you're trying to what information do they need? What topically do you need to create to become an authority, which is going to become even more important with LLMs being an authority within your market. So, and kind of building those hub and spoke model kind of content things. So previously I have seen kind of content strategies where it might be like, here's the top 10 best performing keywords, but they're on 10 different topics, like in no way related. So we're going to create 10 almost standalone pieces of content, whereas actually that's not the case anymore. It's like, here's our pillar piece of content on a particular topic, and here's all of the things that surround that, and we're creating that to be the best possible resource for a potential customer, as opposed to because that one has a search volume of 1,000 versus that one has a search volume of 10, for example. it's kind of, if you haven't already shifted from that, now's the time to do it. But kind of the best time to do it was a year ago, a couple of years ago, if not further. The second best time to do it is now, essentially, because that's what you need to do. It is just one of those things you need to get away from thinking, oh, that's a piece of data around a keyword, as opposed to actually what does my audience care about.
Mm-hmm. It's that brand building, isn't it? Like brand authority, like building that around the moat around your brand. You want to be the authority, and how they get to your website, your product is sort of secondary. If you're creating all this content, you become that authority. So I mean, a space that we're in is cybersecurity, and we're creating lots of really great pillar content and cluster content around problems that we know that CISOs have, and different type of job roles, because we know that when they're looking for that and they find that problem and we can solve that problem, then we have that brand awareness and we can bring them into our ecosystem. That sort of approach can then work around different type of businesses and different industries in the B2B space. That allows us to really develop the content from a different perspective, which will then tackle both the organic side, the GEO side, and then be used in different marketing as well. And that's really seeing some great results in some of the areas that we see.
Ultimately, as just to pick up a point that Dan said, if you can create a strong enough brand, doesn't really matter what's going on in the search engines, because people don't go to the search engine, they come to you. So if their first thought is, I'm going to go to X brand because I trust their content, I know their content's good, and I know they're going to answer the question, they're not going to Google it, they're not going to go to ChatGPT, they're just going to go and find it. And ultimately, that's a position, that's a really strong position to be in, because it doesn't really then matter what the shift in SEO is, because you've got that brand where people go, actually, I know that. It's like magazine sites or that kind of thing in our industry. There's some really big SEO kind of informational brands, and it's like, actually, do I go to the search results and find a random piece of information from another website, or do I just go and see what that brand has said about that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree. I think we've touched on GEO across a couple of the points. And for anyone who's not familiar, GEO, generative engine optimization, is essentially optimizing for LLMs like ChatGPT, Perplexity, etc. I think one question a lot of brands might have is, how does this fit alongside SEO? Because one thing that's, I think, widely accepted at this point is that SEO heavily influences GEO performance. If you want to do well in GEO, you'd need to be doing well in SEO. So what role do you guys think GEO is going to play as part of an SEO strategy? Matt, I'll come to you.
Yeah, I guess it's not, just to slightly change your point, it's not necessarily if you're doing well in SEO, you do well in GEO because you're doing well in SEO. It's because realistically, the things that you need to do for GEO are also very similar to the things that have been really good SEO practice for quite some time.
Yeah.
So realistically, it's SEO is search engine optimization. People have kind of just associated that with Google because they have such big market share. LLMs are just a variation of a search engine, effectively. So it's still realistically, all of these things work on having crawled your site and understanding your information. That's the same for SEO as it is for GEO. So that's why the two are so heavily related. So realistically, it's making sure that the whichever bot it is able to find your information, understand what it's about, and understand its relevance in your authority within a particular topic. The way you do that, there's lots of tactical elements to doing that. Obviously, it can start from your kind of general content strategy, but kind of it might go down to schema. It kind of was really big, seemed to disappear for a while. It's something that the LLMs is kind of really useful for that. So kind of that schema is making a big comeback. From a technical SEO point of view, there's things like literally how you structure data, structure information, but also, I guess, from a wider strategic elements that would previously have gone broadly into SEO. So things like digital PR, that sort of thing. Another really key area is kind of having that defensible position within your market. So if you can create content that only you can create, so you're the primary resource or you're the primary data point for a piece of content, that's going to work really well within the LLM. So it's almost dialing up some parts of what was traditionally SEO and dialing some other parts down because they're not as important, or just tweaking that approach. It's ultimately, I think it's a very similar approach, just the results are going to be different insofar as the raw traffic numbers, for example. But if you're creating content that the search engine or the LLM can find, they can understand, that they perceive as authoritative, and then certainly if you're the primary data source of that, that is going to make you win within the LLMs in the same way it made you win within Google.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think, I mean, you may have answered this already, Matt, but I think one question that a lot of brands will have is, do we need an SEO strategy and a GEO strategy, or really is it a combined effort considering the significant overlap? Dan, might be one
Yeah.
or Matt to answer.
I mean, personally, I would say it's definitely, it's got to be combined, but it's also got to be combined with paid, it's got to be combined with email and all of those things. So it should be more of a overall holistic marketing approach rather than a geo and SEO sit here and kind of a bit more siloed. I will let Dan speak and on that as well.
No, I agree. I think what we tend to get bogged down with is individual tactics and then classing them as strategies. Ultimately, we've got a marketing strategy, and then we're using different tactics to achieve that strategy. So as Matt indicated, that the strategy should include all of your marketing channels and what you're trying to achieve. And then you just break it down into, let's go, right, these are the tactics that we're going to utilize to try and achieve this strategy and achieve the objectives that the marketing team have that will then impact the business. Ultimately, all of those sort of have to have knock-on effects. The business goal cannot be the marketing goal because there has to be other things that contribute to that. It needs to support that. But going back to like the geo element of this, I see much like Matt's just talked about, it's very much the same with some tweaks and elements and suggestions where you go more focused on, actually, you have some nice to haves in the past. Schema was a nice to have and things like that in most cases. And if it was going to cost a lot of money to implement because of development costs, you might not put that in place. Whereas now it's a really important element. And obviously the content tweaks in terms of making sure that it's readable from a user's perspective, but also from an LM point of view as well. You chunk it down into some sections, you utilize bullet points and all of those different structures is really, really important. I think the other thing to consider at this stage is LLMs are quite immature. We are very early into this. So it will be, and there's already stuff out there that goes, we're going to be doing like SEO from like 2013 just to try and get into the GA rankings now. And some people are going to go, well, we're going backwards, or I don't want to be doing these things. Simple ones are listicles and like the best X, the best Ys. And if you're on that list and you're co-cited in different places, that may help build your authority within the LLMs. That from a marketing perspective will be seen as old school. We don't want to go back down to that route, but ultimately if it gets you into the GEOs now and it helps you build that traffic, should you be doing it for the best of the business rather than what it potentially looks like? That's a question that everyone will have to answer, and that will be a case-by-case basis, I'm sure. But yeah, there is going to be a lot of crossover here.
Yeah, even like language tweaks just to increase the relevancy to certain entities and that kind of thing. It's as Dan said, there's been a lot of things that I've seen which is like, you know, we did used to do this 10-15 years ago for SEO purposes, and we probably dusting a bit of that off again. But there's also obviously, just as I said, making it a more modern approach, so not siloed, and making sure that, because ultimately what the LLMs want is what the user's going to want at the end of the day. So if you've got a piece of content which has a clear structure, It's got clear summaries. It's got kind of cited information. It's authoritative. That's ultimately what a user wants at the same time, and what Google wants, obviously. And they're always going on about create quality content, and ultimately that's to a certain extent what the LLMs want. It just needs to be in the right understandable, in the right format that's understandable. So there will be format shifts, and certainly from a, like, as with a combined strategy, you might be looking at different channels at different points of your funnel. So you still need to create that commercial content, and that might be more what you're doing to appear within Google and still gain that traffic that comes from Google. But you would still need that for the LLMs, but that's going to be kind of a lower volume thing, because people are still going to want to come to a website to convert, for example.
Yeah, exactly that. I should just say we do have a dedicated webinar to GEO coming up in the series, so that's probably one where we can get a bit deeper into the specific tactics that you may or may not want to try at the moment. I think, you know, we've been talking for about 20 minutes now, and I think there's been a lot of really useful information. But I imagine there's going to be people watching this with their pen and paper ready, just trying to get an idea in terms of what specific things do I need to include in my planning for next year in terms of SEO, and what perhaps are the things that we should be dialing down or even turning off. So it'd be good just to get your thoughts in terms of what needs to have an increased focus next year, and what are the things that we maybe need to focus less on. Matt, do you want to go first?
I will. You're always picking on me first, but
I couldn't remember.
Essentially, I'd definitely go with. There's nothing that I would remove completely. I would potentially dial down, depending on how you do your content. I might dial down the top of the funnel. From, if you're an agency working for other people, I might dial that down and rely more upon a particular client creating that, or kind of their just normal content creation flow. If you're a brand itself, you still need to be creating that top of the funnel. Where I'd put a lot more resource are the middle of the funnel content, so comparisons, case studies, all of that sort of information. Also, your commercial pages right at the bottom of the funnel. Never been more important, in my opinion. You kind of making sure you have the right commercial pages. You've got the kind of, is there different ways that you can split those commercial pages, or different ways you can present those commercial pages? So kind of, is there industry pages? Is there whatever your service is for a particular job role, for whatever it may be, just to kind of make sure that you're giving a very as personalized approach as you can to every user that comes to your site, so they can self-select their journey through your site. And on that final topic around kind of journeys, definitely kind of UX and CRO, I would dial that up massively, essentially, because it is, you do need to make sure that every person that comes to your website, every user, does some kind of action so you can get them into your CRM. So even if it's just getting more people onto your newsletter, or more people into your marketing list in general, obviously any sort of, like, ultimately the revenue generating conversions are the ones that you need to focus on, but making sure that nothing is wasted and getting everybody into that. And then the very final one, which I would definitely dial up, is around anything that you can do around data. Become a data source, become a primary resource for a piece of information. So recurring surveys, that sorts of things. So you are, and you continue to be, an authority within your area. The thing I will caution against is you do need the resource to be able to do that on an ongoing basis. If you do it once and never again, that will almost have the exact opposite. You need to create something that is an ongoing thing that you can produce. If not, take a slightly different approach to becoming that authority within your market. So yeah, so top of the funnel, probably down slightly, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel content up, CRO up massively, become a data source, kind of dial that up in whatever way that you can, basically.
Dan, I assume you agree with most of that, but is there anything else that you'd add to it?
Yeah, I think to be honest, Matt's covered all of it for me. It's very much the way that we're working in terms of um, flipping the funnel almost and making sure we concentrate on the bottom and the middle as the first points, and then you're supporting that with the ongoing top of the funnel content. And the key thing that I'm seeing a lot more now is, and we're doing a vast amount of this, is internal linking, making sure that we're linking from any educational content through to your commercial content, making sure all those pillars and clusters are really tight and interlinked and things like that, because that's really important. And we're seeing that being important in the geo as well as within that, because the crawlers can then get into different pages, and it is starting to reference some of those. So that's one thing. I think the other thing that is going to have a bit of a renaissance, I think, is digital PR. I think that's something that will start to have more attributed to it. I think the challenge here will be whether consumers or clients and brands have the budget to be able to put into digital PR, because digital PR will be a position where it's not always going to work. You're not always going to get that big bang piece. I think you see all of these great campaigns, but you don't see all of the ones that have failed. So I think it's great to see all these big bang ones, but I mean, you might have failed 3, 4, 5 times before that one actually hits, and that is a lot of investment to be able to do that. So there's no guarantee in return, but I think that's going to be important for not only from an organic perspective, but from a brand building authority perspective as well, which goes back to what we was talking about around zero clicks and like brand and authority within search and SEO specifically. So I think that will have a bit of a renaissance, but potentially around budgets will be the constraints.
Yeah, completely agreed. I think, I mean, given all that good advice, which I think most people will tend to agree with, I think some brands will still naturally make mistakes in 2026. They'll either do certain things or perhaps not do certain things. It'd be good to get your thoughts in terms of what you think the kind of common SEO mistakes might be. I think from my point of view, it would go back to an earlier point that we discussed, is not kind of changing the metrics around visibility and continuing to report on top of the funnel traffic in the same way. I think that's a big mistake, because if you're hoping for clicks from a lot of top of the funnel traffic, you're just not going to get them. You know, the landscape has changed. And if you're not recording visibility to the kind of degree that you need to, that's going to be a huge blind spot for you as well. And you're just not going to know what's happening in those earlier stages of the buying cycle. Dan, I don't know whether you've got any mistakes that you think brands might make next year.
Yes, but I don't think it's going to be tactical or anything like that. I think the biggest mistake people are going to make, and I see it already happening, is businesses are going to overly rely on AI to strategize, execute, measure, to do the whole thing. Whereas the reality is it will be useful for execution, but it's not quite there from strategy point of view. You need to have data, you need to have people that know SEO and geo and all these different channels to be able to develop an AI not strategy, but an AI executional piece. If you put garbage in, you get garbage out, essentially. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of. We talk to lots of businesses and they're saying, oh, no, AI does that. And we monitor those businesses after 6, 7, 8 months. There's no change. You can see what they're doing, and it is just that garbage in, garbage out. And what I think needs to happen is knowledgeable people need to utilize AI as a tool to support, not to replace individuals or skilled workers that can actually do the job by thinking and bringing everything together, whether it's intent, whether it's empathy, whatever that may be. I think that's where some businesses will make mistakes.
Just to on Dan's point there, ultimately, if you look at something like SEO, the information about how you do SEO has been freely available to everybody for years. Like, we're, as an industry, really good at sharing what works, what doesn't work, and all of that kind of stuff. Ultimately, people still do bad SEO because they've got the tactics, but they don't understand the strategy, or they don't understand the audience. And realistically, if you're relying on AI to then create that strategy for you, for example, all that's going to do is pull from their language models all of these tactical things, and present it in the same way. Like that information's already been available to you, but unless you understand the audience and the reason and your specific brand, which an AI like ChatGPT doesn't ultimately understand your brand or your audience in the way that you do, it's just going to sound really convincing that it does. It's not going to give you a strategy that necessarily is going to work. It's going to tell you all the tactics, but not when and why to use them. And that's where the expertise and the knowledge and the marketing skill comes in ultimately. So that's one of the bits that I would just follow up on Dan's thing. From my point of view, I think the people who are going to struggle are the people who stubbornly stick to what they have been doing. So as I said right at the start, this is probably the biggest evolution of digital marketing in since I've been working in digital marketing effectively. If you continue to try and do SEO from 2024, early 2025, it realistically is not going to work. You're not going to get the results. What you need to be doing is evolving your approach, and you've had to be doing it anyway, realistically. But if you haven't been doing that to this point, if you continue to stubbornly follow that kind of approach, it really is not going to work. It's like they're the people that are going to lose, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. I think the final point I wanted to cover was just much of what we talked about is what we think is going to happen next year, and a lot of that we can be fairly certain on. Some of it is still speculative. It's a rapidly changing landscape, certainly in terms of the AI side of things. It'd be good if we could just get our crystal balls out for sort of 30 seconds and just get, I think, just one bet that you're kind of really sure on will happen in 2026, and something you think the listeners can kind of take away as gospel and definitely put into their planning for next year as far as SEO is concerned.
Do you want me to go first, Dan?
Go on, mate, you go. I had the last one.
Essentially, as soon as Google effectively learn how to monetize the AI mode, that will be the default for Google. Basically, the only reason it's not there at the moment is because they're reliant on the ad revenue, and that's much higher currently from the normal results. There's a lot of white space on the AI mode that's going to get kind of eaten by advertising. As soon as they figure that out, then Google will switch, and that will be the default. So if you fundamentally believe it's going to be the kind of the normal search results for forever and ever, then that's where you're being a bit too stubborn. You've got to embrace the fact that everything is going to move towards AI.
Yeah, I don't even think you need the crystal ball to see that one coming, to be fair. I think you should have done this already, but if you haven't moved to changing content structures and all those type of things, making sure that all of the key elements that would help you from a geo perspective and an AI mode type sort of perspective, then you're already behind the curve. So if you're not doing it now and you're not going to start doing it until next year, then you're way behind. You're just catching up. So I think like start optimizing for sort of machines as well as people, whereas we've always sort of done it the opposite way around. It's always been optimizing for people. We've now got to switch that to think about how do we optimize for both machines and people.
I've got the other one that is definitely going to happen is authority is going to be even more important than it already is. Obviously, Google have been going on about it for years. They've got their EAT stuff that they've been going on for ages. But again, combining that with what the LLMs are also looking for around authority is going to be another really big area, and people who are, or brands that are trusted and have built that authority are going to wildly outperform people who've ignored that. So again, if you go onto your blog and you don't have author bios, you have your marketing team are the people who are the authors on your your posts and that kind of thing, and you haven't built that authority, you've jumped around between topic areas, now is the time to resolve that. Make sure that your internal team, it's really difficult, but making sure your internal team are committed to kind of creating that content and see the reason and the benefit of them contributing to your kind of marketing efforts. They're going to be the people that win. The people who are just kind of doing top level kind of articles published by their marketing team and not kind of building the authors and the authority are going to be the ones that struggle.
I think one just follow-up point from me, which I think is almost certain, just to go back to Matt's point then, is trying to do all of those good things, but leaning on AI tools too heavily to do them. So getting AI to create all of their content without any human oversight, for example, or trying to get AI to generate links, etc. I think it's very tempting to do because of the efficiencies. We see a lot of people doing it, but common sense says if so many people are doing it and it's the quality is not there and the authenticity is not there, it's just not going to work. It's not going to work from a kind of technical SEO point of view. It's not going to work from a user's point of view. I mean, we've been working on kind of using AI efficiencies in marketing activity for, I think, the best part of 18 months now. And it's a real slog to get it right and get it working. I think it's a big mistake for someone just to rely on that solely, or even sort of 80 or 90%, because it's not going to make you stand out. It's not going to allow you to be a kind of differentiator in the market.
Especially if like LLMs are still working, ChatGPT specifically are working on old information, so not always up to date. So if you're getting it to just create content as an example and it's not updated, or it's like you're talking about policies or sort of regulations and stuff like that, it's unlikely to find or gather that sort of information. Your USP will be specifically around probably middle to bottom of the funnel is being human written original content that comes in with some of the data that Matt talked about earlier, and things like that.
I mean, just to follow up on that point, I can think of specific clients where their particular industry, there is they have a lot of people within their business that create the content, and they're the people that have maintained the volume of traffic compared to other people that I've seen the analytics. Or essentially, if you're the authority and the people within your business are creating up-to-date content, as you mentioned, Dan, they're the ones that are going to maintain their search volumes. In fact, they're the ones that are still seeing increase in their informational traffic, because they are an authority and they're still ranking really well. They're still generating clicks. It's the people that are kind of doing top level, or it's as you've alluded to, it's kind of more AI orientated content creation. There you've got no defensible position.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's a really good point. I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. I want to thank Dan and Matt for joining. I think it's been really useful. I'm sure people who are watching it would agree with that. The next webinar in the series is on paid media, and we'll be discussing things like how to deal with rising cost per clicks, the kind of increase in automation in tools like Google Ads and Microsoft Ads, and how to kind of deal with the kind of shrinking targeting options and all the other challenges with paid media in 2026. But thanks everyone for listening. Hope you found it useful, and goodbye.